You focused intently in front of you as you made the final adjustments to the gauntlets. 2 weeks had passed since your last encounter with Dynamite, and you'd thrown yourself into implementing the improvements you'd discussed. Now, with him watching your every move, the pressure to perform was intense, scorching really. You could feel his presence behind you, radiating heat and impatience. The air crackled with an almost palpable tension. It was a wonder how villains faced him head-on with this murderous aura that clung to him like a pair of very tight pants. You tried to ignore the way your heart rate picked up, chalking it up to simple nerves about the gear rather than other tight factors. Oi, nerd! What's taking so long? Dynamite's gruff voice rang out. You didn't look up from your work, keeping your tone carefully neutral. Precision takes time. Unless you'd prefer your gauntlets to blow up in your face. As if your shitty tech could take me down. Then let me work, you replied, your voice clipped. You made another minute adjustment. Did he have to look at you work? Pretty sure there were a million other things better to do than to watch. His intense stare made your skin prickle. It made you feel like you were about to rob a senior home. Today, he wasn't in his usual hero costume. Instead, dreadfully thankfully, he wore civilian clothes that did absolutely nothing to diminish his intimidating presence. Dark jeans hugged his muscular legs, and a fitted black t-shirt stretched across his broad chest, leaving little to the imagination. A leather jacket was slung carelessly over one shoulder. He looked like he just stepped out of a fashion magazine shoot. You tried not to notice how good he looked. You really tried. But try as you might, you couldn't help it, especially not when you like me, don't you, nerd? Kept ringing in your head. The thought made scoff. You didn't like him. You couldn't. He was arrogant, loud, and impossibly frustrating. Just because he looked unfairly attractive and casual, where didn't change anything. What's that for? His sharp question snapped you back to reality. He was leaning over your shoulder now, close enough that you could smell that stupid sweetness of his. No, stop it. You took a steadying breath, forcing yourself to focus. It's a stabilizer for the ignition mechanism. It'll give you more control over the size and intensity of your explosions. TCH. I've got plenty of control already, he growled, but his eyes remained fixed on your work. Sure you do, you mocked. That's why we're here making improvements, right? His hand slammed down on the workbench. What was that for eyes? You finally looked up at him, meeting his fierce gaze with a level stare of your own. I said, that's why we're making improvements. To give you even more control. Unless you'd rather stick with your old gear? His jaw clenched and a thick aroma of burnt sugar wafted through the air. His red eyes blazed with irritation, and you could see the muscle in his jaw working as he ground his teeth. But then, to your surprise, he let out a huff of laughter. You are either fucking brave or as stupid for talking to me like that, nerd. Both, though lately more of the latter. He stepped closer, his eyes narrowing, but they weren't as intense, as murderous as before. Get back to work. And this better be fucking amazing, you hear me? Yes, your highness, you replied dryly, turning back to the gauntlet. His lips curled into a smug grin. About damn time you recognized my superiority, nerd. Took you long enough. Wow, your humility is truly inspiring. How do you ever manage to stay so modest? He scoffed, crossing his arms over his chest. The movement made his biceps flex and ripple under his tight black shirt. Not that you were looking, of course. I don't need to be fucking humble. It's just facts. I am the best. Right, of course. How silly of me to suggest otherwise. Now, if His Majesty doesn't mind, some of us peasants have work to do. TCH. At least you know your place, nerd. For the next hour, you worked steadily, desperately, very desperately ignoring the caramel smell that had impregnated the room. Dynamite peppered you with questions and comments. What's that do? Why's it gotta be so damn complicated? You better not be screwing this up, nerd. You answered each query with as much patience as humanly possible, explaining the function of each component and the reasoning behind your design choices. It turned out to be a very delicate balance, maintaining your professionalism while also standing your ground against his relentless questioning. The complexity is necessary for the level of control you're demanding. You explained for what felt like the 100th time. It probably was the 100th time. If you want pinpoint accuracy with your explosions, we need to account for multiple variables. Dynamite grunted, leaning in closer to examine a particular component. And this thing here? You suppressed a sigh. That's the pressure regulator. It helps control the force of the explosion by managing the release of your sweat. Huh. He was quiet for a moment, his brow furrowed in concentration. Then abruptly he straightened up. All right, let's see it in action. You blinked. He had to be joking, but as you looked at his face, he was indeed not joking. What now? You protested. I've only just finished the adjustments. We should run some diagnostics first, make sure everything's calibrated correctly. Dynamite's lip curled into a sneer. What? You don't trust your own work? Scared it might blow up in my face after all? The gall of this man. Of course I trust my work. But proper testing protocols exist for a reason, Dynamite. We can't just dash. You were cut off mid-sentence as Dynamite's hand slammed down on the workbench again. Enough with the fucking protocols, he growled, his eyes blazing. I want to test these babies out now. You took a deep breath. Dynamite, I understand you're eager, but these gauntlets are not ready for a full-scale test. We need to dash. I said now, nerd, he interrupted, his voice low and dangerous. Or are you admitting you can't handle the job? This foo. Your jaw clenched. The rational part of your brain screamed at you to not let him win, to insist on proper safety measures. But another part, the part that couldn't resist a challenge from this infuriating man, made you hesitate. Fine, you agreed, but we do this my way. Controlled environment, minimal output. Deal. A triumphant smirk spread across Dynamite's face. Whatever you say, Four Eyes. Let's get this show on the road. Grumbling under your breath, you gathered the necessary equipment and led him to the testing area. As you set up the safety barriers and monitoring devices, you couldn't shake the feeling that this was a terrible idea. A fucking terrible, irresponsible idea. All right, you said, handing him the gauntlets. Remember, start small. We're just testing the basic functionality, not trying to level a city block. He slipped on the gauntlets. Yeah. I know how to control my quirk, nerd. You stepped back, your heart racing as you watched him take his stance. This was it. Weeks of work, countless sleepless nights, all coming down to this moment. Ready when you are, you called out, your finger hovering over the recording button. Dynamite grinned, that wild, almost manic expression that made your stomach do somersaults. Let's light it up. He raised his hand, palm out, and you held your breath. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a deafening boom, an explosion erupted from the gauntlet. But instead of the controlled blast you designed, it was a wild, uncontained burst of flame and smoke. He stumbled backward. You lunged forward, hitting the emergency shutdown button before racing to his side. Damn it! You should have known. Dread twisted your stomach. You did know, but you let your stupid pride win. This was all your fault. He could have gotten hurt because of you. Dynamite, are you all right? You shouted over the ringing in your ears. He shook his head, looking dazed for a moment before his eyes locked onto yours. The confusion in his gaze quickly morphed into fury. What the fuck was that? He roared, ripping off the gauntlets and throwing them to the ground. You call that control? I could have taken my own fucking arm off. You flinched at the volume of his voice. He was right, but he was also a stubborn asswipe. This is exactly why I wanted to run diagnostics first. If you had just listened to me dash. Oh, so this is my fault now. Dynamite snarled, stepping closer to you. You're the one who fucked up, nerd. I didn't fuck up anything. You shot back, professionalism out the window, well, because fuck this guy and that temper of his. You took a step closer. If you hadn't insisted on rushing the process, we could have caught this in the lab. You glared up at Dynamite, frustration coursing through you. He opened his mouth to reply, but you needed to get this off your chest. If you'd just followed proper protocols, dash. Protocols? He scoffed, leaning in closer. I don't need your damn protocols to tell me how to use my quirk. Clearly you do, since you nearly blew yourself up. You snapped back, jabbing a finger into his chest. You swallowed. You were standing so close. Heat radiated off him, his sweet, caramel scent overwhelmed your senses. Your fingers pressed against the solid muscle of his chest, and you felt a jolt of electricity run through you. Dynamite's hand shot out, gripping your wrist. His palm was warm, almost scorching, and so large it engulfed your entire wrist. For a heart-stopping moment, you thought he might actually use his quirk on you. But instead, he just held you there, his intense gaze boring into yours. His touch was almost gentle. You tried to swallow again, but your throat was drier than bonito flakes. You almost wished he would have just blown you up rather than touch you like this. If he touched you like this, it made you feel. No. You yanked your hand away, your heart pounding. What the hell do you think you're doing? A smirk played at the corners of his mouth. Me? You're the one getting handsy, nerd. Can't keep your hands off me, can you? That is not what happened, you sputtered, feeling heat rise to your cheeks. I was making a point. Sure you were, he drawled, his smirk widening. You know, I might have to report you to your boss for sexual harassment. Your jaw dropped. Sexual harassment? You've got to be kidding me. Dynamite leaned in closer, his voice low and teasing. First you can't stop staring at me, now you're copping a feel. Face it, Four Eyes, you're into me. I am not Dash, you started, but your voice faltered as you realized how close he was. You could feel the heat of his minty breath on your face, see the flecks of gold in his crimson eyes. No, he murmured, his gaze dropping to your lips for a fraction of a second. Could have fooled me. You swallowed hard. Maybe you had hit your head, and you were having a concussion. That had to be it had to. Right? This was too much, too intense. You needed to get out of there before you did something incredibly stupid and risked your entire career. We're done here, you managed to say. You bent down to snatch up the discarded gauntlets, pointedly avoiding eye contact. Running away, nerd? Dynamite called after you as you strode towards the door. Thought you were tougher than that. You paused at the threshold, turning to glare at him one last time. I'm not running away. I'm removing myself from an unproductive situation. We'll discuss the gauntlets once you've calmed down and are ready to approach this professionally. With that, you marched out of the room, trying to ignore the way your skin still tingled where he'd touched you, and the lingering scent of caramel that clung to your clothes. Get it together. You probably just sustained some major head trauma, and you were imagining things. You set the gauntlets down and forced every brain cell you still had to focus on the problem at hand. Taking a deep breath, you made yourself to slip into work mode. You examined the gauntlets methodically, checking each component for signs of damage or malfunction. As you worked, you could hear Dynamite pacing behind you, muttering curses under his breath. You tuned him out, losing yourself in the familiar routine of troubleshooting. Wire by wire, circuit by circuit, you combed through the intricate mechanisms you'd spent countless hours perfecting. You were definitely not going to think about what just happened. Bakugo paced the workshop, his eyes darting between the clock on the wall and the nerd hunched over his gauntlets. The tech, he refused to use her name, even in his thoughts, had been tinkering for what felt like hours. His fingers twitched, itching to grab his gear and get the hell out of there. But something held him back. He should have blasted her. Should have put her in her place the moment she dared to talk back to him. That's what he would have done to anyone else who had the nerve to fuck up his test, and then act like it was his fault. But he hadn't. What the fuck was wrong with him? Since when did he let some smart-mouthed extra get away with that kind of shit? He remembered ways she'd stood her ground, chin lifted defiantly as she stared him down. Most people cowered when he got in their face. But not her. She'd met his fury head-on, giving as good as she got. It was refreshing. Irritating as hell, but refreshing. Bakuga's jaw clenched. He couldn't remember the last time someone had challenged him like that. Everyone else was too busy kissing his ass or running scared. But this nerd? She didn't seem impressed by his hero status. Didn't back down when he got in her face. It was like she saw right through his bullshit. Bakuga's scowl deepened. He told himself it was just surprise. Yeah, that was it. She'd caught him off guard with her smart mouth and stubborn attitude. It wouldn't happen again. He blinked and Denki's face flashed through his mind. Kaminari, that electric dumbass, leaning against the tech's workbench. Grinning like an idiot, probably spouting some lame pickup line. Bakuga's hands sparked, small explosions popping in his palms. The fuck had that moron been thinking? He never stood a chance with her. She was too fucking smart for a dumbass like him. And why the hell did it make his blood boil? He watched the nerd work. Her fingers moved, adjusting wires and calibrating mechanisms. Oi, nerd, he barked, breaking the silence. How much longer is this gonna take? The tech glanced up, pushing her glasses back up her nose. As long as it takes to do it right. Why don't you go home? I'll call when they're ready. Bakuga snorted. Like hell. I'm not leaving my gear with some random extra who doesn't know how to fucking do her job right. She laughed. Random extra. Funny, I thought I was the only one who could fix your precious gauntlets. TCH. Bakuga looked away, scowling. Just hurry up. Minutes ticked by. The workshop grew quiet, save for the soft clicks and whirs of the tech's tools. You know, the nerd spoke up, not looking away from her work. Glaring at me won't make this go any faster. Shut it, Bakuga growled. I didn't ask for your opinion. She shrugged. Just saying. You could try being patient for once. Patient? Bakuga's voice rose. I've been patient all fucking day. Oh yes, throwing tantrums and terrorizing receptionists. The very picture of patience. Patient? I almost got my fucking arms blown off because of your shitty adjustments. The nerd's eyes blazed with anger, her hands clenching at her sides. She took a deep breath, inhaling slowly before slowly turning to him. It's because we didn't follow protocols, she said, her voice tight. So you admit it's your fault, he sneered, expecting her to snap back. To his surprise, she took another deep breath, her shoulders rising and falling. It was both of our faults, she said evenly, turning back to her workbench. Now, if you don't mind, I have work to do. I don't have time to argue with you. TCH. So the nerd does know when to back down. He was about to give her a piece of his mind, when he stopped. His gaze caught on her mouth as she brought a pen to her lips. Fuck. She nibbled on the end, her teeth grazing the plastic. Her tongue darted out, wetting her lower lip. Heat pooled in Bakuga's gut. He imagined those lips on his skin, that clever tongue on his cock. He shifted, his cock straining in his jeans. What the fuck was wrong with him? She was just some extra, for fuck's sake. But as she sucked gently on the pen, Bakuga couldn't tear his eyes away. Had the blast fucked up his head? There's nothing wrong with the design. The nerd's voice snapped him back to reality. Fucking just roll with it. I was making sure you weren't fucking up my gear again. Right, she drawled, rolling her eyes at him. Because I'm sure you know exactly what I'm doing. This brat and her fucking attitude. I know enough to know when someone's bullshitting me. The tech set down her tools, fixing him with a level stare. Look, Dynamite. You want these fixed? Then let me work. Your macho posturing isn't helping anyone. One small blast and this extra's smug face would vanish. But as much as he hated to admit it, she had a point. He needed those gauntlets fixed. He couldn't afford to fucking fall behind to Deku. She'd been the only fucking one that had made some semblance of improvements. Fine, he growled. But if you screw this up. Yeah, she waved him off. You'll explode me into next week. I got it. As she turned back to her work, Bakugo couldn't help but notice the small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. It was infuriating. And oddly fascinating. Bakugo shook his head again, harder this time. The motion sent a dull ache radiating through his skull. What the fuck was wrong with him? Quietly, Bakugo ran through a mental checklist. Vision. Clear. Balance. He took a few steps. Steady enough. Memory. He could recall today's fight in vivid detail. But then there was that moment with the pen. He growled low in his throat. This was bullshit. He was Dynamite, the number 2 hero. A little knock to the head wasn't going to slow him down. He'd power through this, just like everything else. Still, as he resumed his pacing, Bakugo couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was off. Bakugo's head snapped up at the tech's excited gasp. She'd been hunched over his gauntlets for what seemed like fucking eternity, muttering to herself like the insane person she was. Now her eyes were wide behind those stupid glasses, a grin splitting her face. I've got it, she exclaimed, practically vibrating with excitement. Bakugo tensed as the nerd suddenly launched herself towards him. His combat instincts kicked in, muscles coiling to dodge or counterattack. But as she flew through the air, arms outstretched, he realized that she wasn't attacking. She was going for a fucking hug. He should have moved. Should have let the idiot crash to the floor. It would serve her right for invading his personal space. But his body betrayed him. Before he could think, his arms were moving, catching her easily. He steadied himself, letting her collide against his chest with a soft oof. Her body was soft and warm against his. Her breasts pressed against his chest, and Bakugo's mind went blank. All he could focus on was the feeling of her curves molded to his hard body. Even as much as he wanted to, he couldn't stop. His hands tightened on her waist, fingers digging into the soft flesh. He wanted to pull her closer, to feel every inch of her against him. The urge to slide his hands lower, to cup that perfect ass and grind her against his dick, was almost overwhelming. He did have a fucking concussion, he was sure of it. His blood rushed to his dick. Fuck, she was so warm, so soft. He breathed in her scent, a mix of metal and something sweet that made his head spin, made his cock grow harder. Or maybe that was just the lack of oxygen. How long had he been holding his breath? The tech seemed to realize their position at the same moment. She stiffened in his arms, her eyes widening in what Bakugo could only describe as pure and utter panic, as they met his. A deep crimson blush spread across her face, creeping down her neck and disappearing beneath her collar. It was oddly captivating. Unlike the simpering fangirls who constantly threw themselves at him, her embarrassment seemed genuine. Raw. He found himself wondering just how far that blush extended. The nerd's eyes darted away. Her teeth worried at her lower lip, and Bakugo's own mouth went dry at the sight. She squirmed slightly in his arms. His grip on her waist tightened reflexively. He told himself it was to steady her, nothing more. Fuck, she was alluring like this. All flustered and warm in his arms. Nothing like those fake-ass fangirls. For a moment, neither of them moved. The air between them crackled with tension, thick enough to choke on. Bakugo's gaze dropped to her parted lips. It would be so easy to close that distance, to taste her, to finally get her to shut the fuck up. The tech jerked back suddenly. Bakugo let his arms fall to his sides, his hands clenching into fists to keep from reaching for her again. She stammered, adjusting her glasses. The gauntlets. They're ready for testing. Bakugo nodded stiffly. What the fuck had been that? As he followed her back to the workbench, he tried to ignore the lingering warmth on his palms and the uncomfortable tightness in his pants. The tech fumbled with her tools, her hands shaking slightly as she picked up a diagnostic device. He smirked. Served her right for launching herself at him like that. All right, she said, her voice wavering slightly. I need to run some final tests. This might feel a bit strange. Before Bakugo could ask what she meant, she reached out and grasped his hand. Her touch was gentle but firm as she guided his arm into the gauntlet. The fuck are you doing? He demanded. Calibrating, she muttered, not meeting his eyes. I need to make sure the sensors are properly aligned with your palm. I got a lot of good data from earlier, which gave me more information I needed to calibrate these puppies to perfection. I actually didn't know if it was going to work, which is why her blush returned. She gave a fake-ass cough. Well anyways, let's just do this. Her fingers traced the lines of his hand, pressing here and there as she made minute adjustments. The fuck had this nerd done to him? Had she drugged him? Her touch was clinical, professional, but his body didn't seem to care. Every brush of her skin against his sent floods of lust to his dick. He gritted his teeth. The fuck was going on? It hadn't been that long since he had gotten laid. So why was his body acting like a horny 15-year-old? This was ridiculous. She was just some nerd, for fuck's sake. So what if her hands were soft and warm? So what if the scent of her shampoo was making his head spin? Other arm, she said quietly, finally releasing his hand. Bakuga grunted, extending his other arm. This time he was prepared for her touch. Or so he thought. As her fingers skimmed along his forearm, adjusting the fit of the gauntlet, he had to bite back a groan. What the fuck was wrong with him? He'd never reacted like this to anyone before. Sure, he'd felt attraction, lust even. But this was something else entirely. It was like every nerve in his body was on high alert, hyper-aware of her proximity. There, she said at last, stepping back. That should do it. How do they feel? He flexed his hands, testing the weight and fit of the gauntlets. They moved with him perfectly, like an extension of his own body. Not bad, he admitted grudgingly. The tech beamed. Great. Now let's run through some basic exercises to make sure everything's functioning correctly this time. For the next hour, Bakuga went through a series of movements and controlled explosions, following the nerd's instructions. To his surprise, the gauntlets performed flawlessly. Each blast was precisely controlled, the force distributed exactly as he intended. As they finished the final test, the tech let out a triumphant whoop. Yes. Perfect. She grinned up at him, her eyes shining. What did I tell you? I know what I'm doing. Bakuga rolled his eyes, but he couldn't quite keep the smirk off his face. Yeah. Don't let it go to your head, nerd. Her triumphant grin faded slightly, replaced by a look of expectation. She raised an eyebrow at him, clearly waiting for something more. What? He growled, irritation creeping into his voice. Oh, nothing, she said innocently, though her tone suggested otherwise. I just thought maybe the great Dynamite might have something else to say. You know, about my work. Bakuga snorted. You fishing for compliments, nerd? She shrugged, a small smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. Maybe. Is it working? He rolled his eyes, but found himself fighting back a smirk of his own. This damned brat. Most people cowered in his presence, but she seemed to enjoy pushing his buttons. Fine, he grumbled. You did acceptable work. The tech's eyebrows shot up. Acceptable? That's it? Come on, Dynamite, you can do better than that. Bakuga seized her up. This brat had some nerve. But as he looked at her expectant face, something stirred in his chest and cock. Before he could stop himself, the words slipped out. Good girl, he said, his voice low and husky. The effect was immediate. The tech's eyes widened, a deep blush spreading across her cheeks. She bit her lower lip, something Bakuga found out he really liked. He smirked, unable to resist pushing further. What's the matter, nerd? You like being called a good girl? Bakuga grinned as the nerd fumbled for words. The blush on her cheeks deepened, spreading down her neck. Served her right. The tech suddenly turned away, busying herself with picking up tools from the workbench. Her movements were jerky, uncoordinated. Bakuga smirked. He'd finally managed to throw her off balance. You can go now, she muttered, not meeting his eyes. The gauntlets are fixed. Fuck that. Things were getting fun now. What if I don't want to? The tech's hands stilled for a moment before resuming their task. Why wouldn't you want to leave? I thought you couldn't wait to get out of here. Maybe I want to make sure you don't fuck anything up after I'm gone, he shot back, crossing his arms over his chest. She snorted, finally turning to face him. Please. As if you'd even know what to look for. I know enough, Bakuga growled, taking a step closer. I'm not some dumbass extra like the idiots you usually deal with. The tech rolled her eyes. Oh yes, you're so special. How could I forget? And there it was again, that smart-ass mouth of hers. Damn right I am, he smirked. Number 2 hero, remember? As if you'd ever let anyone forget. The fuck is that supposed to mean? Nothing, she said, waving a hand dismissively. Just that your ego is probably visible from space. This fucking brat. You got a problem with me, nerd? No problem, she said, turning back to her cleanup. Just stating facts. She moved around the workshop, methodically putting away tools and materials. She was ignoring him, he realized with fury. No one ignored him. Oi, he barked. I'm talking to you. The tech didn't even look up. And I'm working. Some of us have actual jobs to do, you know. Bakuga's hands sparked with small explosions. Who the fuck did this brat think she was? He was Dynamite, for fuck's sake. People cowered at his feet, not dismissed him like some annoying fly. She had been blushing like some schoolgirl not 5 minutes ago, and now she was ignoring him? Bakuga opened his mouth to fire back a retort, but the words died in his throat as the brat bent over the workbench. His eyes locked onto the curve of her ass, his mind instantly flooded with images of gripping those hips and pounding into her from behind. He imagined her smart mouth finally put to better use, moaning and gasping instead of talking back. Would she still have that fiery attitude with his cock buried inside her? Or would she melt into a submissive puddle, begging for more? Bakuga's Jean felt uncomfortable. Fuck. He needed to get out of there before he did something stupid. That thought died as more blood pumped into his dick as she reached up to place something on a high shelf. Her shirt rode up, exposing a strip of skin at her waist. His mouth went dry at the sight. He imagined running his hands over that soft skin, feeling her shiver under his touch. Fuck, he wanted to taste her, to mark that silky flesh with his teeth and tongue. The tech turned suddenly, catching him staring. A blush bloomed across her cheeks, and Bakugo felt a sense of satisfaction, like he won. He liked that he could do this to her. Bakugo's lips curled into a predatory grin. He took a step closer, his eyes locked on the tech's flushed face. "What's wrong, nerd?" he taunted, his voice low and rough. "You're looking a little red. Something got you all hot and bothered." The tech's blush deepened, her eyes darting away from his intense gaze. "That's right, brat." He leaned in closer, invading her personal space. "Or maybe," he drawled, his breath hot against her ear, "you want me to call you a good girl again?" The noise that she let out should have grated on his nerves, but it didn't. The brat let out a high-pitched squeal, stumbling backward. "And no." Bakugo laughed. It was harsh and mocking, but he was genuinely amused. This nerd was just too fucking easy to rile up once you knew what buttons to push. He towered over her, enjoying the way she had to crane her neck to look up at him. "Oh yeah, then why are you blushing?" She opened her loud-ass mouth, but nothing came out. Bakugo grinned, leaning in even closer. He could feel the heat radiating off her body, smell the sweet scent of her skin. "Cat got your tongue?" he murmured, his voice low and husky. The tech swallowed hard, her eyes wide behind her glasses. Her eyes darted to his lips and she licked her plush lips. Her breath hitched as she continued to stare. Fuck it. If she wanted to start this, who was he to deny her? Then abruptly she ducked under his arm. "Your gauntlets," she said, her voice slightly breathless as she handed them to him. "Don't forget them." Bakugo took the gauntlets, his fingers brushing against hers in the process. All that brief contact did was made him want to touch her more. Tease her more. See how far she could go. Fuck this shit. The brat all but scampered to the other side of the room. Instead of feeling annoyed, he enjoyed the chase. There was something intoxicating about the way she reacted to him, a mix of desire and defiance that set his blood on fire. "I'll, check in with you later," she stammered, trying to regain her composure. "To see how the gauntlets are doing, I mean." Bakugo smirked, ready to tease her further. But a glance at the clock made him pause. Shit. He had patrol in a couple of hours. As much as he was enjoying this little game, he needed to test the gauntlets properly before heading out. "Looking forward to it, nerd," he drawled, his voice dripping with suggestion. And fuck it, he actually was looking forward to it. He turned to leave, but couldn't resist one last jab. At the door, he looked back over his shoulder, catching her eye. "Don't work too hard," he said with a smirk. "Wouldn't want you getting all hot and bothered without me around." The tech's face flamed red once more, and Bakugo grinned before walking out the door.